go to the third and last speaker of this panel, Dr. France Córdova. And you have an incredible series of leadership roles that you've had, Dr. Córdova, in science and engineering and education and government over 30 plus years. So for many of you who didn't read the bio until recently, Dr. Córdova was the director of the National Science Foundation. She was the 14th director, where she launched a great many programs, very impressive ones. Currently, Dr. Córdova is the president of Science Philanthropy Alliance, which works with foundations and philanthropists to support basic research of certain kinds that doesn't get supported. Dr. Córdova is the only woman to have served as president of Purdue University. She served as NASA's chief scientist. She's internationally recognized as an astrophysicist with incredible contributions in space research and other areas. And she has a PhD in physics from Caltech. And so I guess I was very amazed, Dr. Córdova, because I didn't know of you before, about the number of segments that you have served in and the number of personal firsts that you have had in being a senior scientist at NASA, then this, then this, then this. So the perspective is incredible. And I'm looking forward to your comments, as we all are. So go ahead, please.
Great. Thanks very much, Rati. And thank you to Lydia for inviting me to participate. Usually, we all get a lot of requests on our time. And it really makes a difference when somebody that you know, and to use Tapia's words, love, like Lydia asks you to do something, then you just say, oh, okay, of course, I'll make the time. So thank you. It's always great to see you again. So my remarks are addressed to the younger folks in our audience, students, and people generally who aspire to be leaders. Previous panelists have talked about institutional change, and my remarks are mainly about the change that needs to be embraced by us. You need both things. And so for most of us, it takes a long time to realize who we are, and a longer time to realize what we can do to give back to others to make positive change. And that, in my mind, is the evolution of a leader. It's a process. And my view is that it has little to do with the color of our skin, our gender identity, or our background. It has more to do with what we can accept and what we cannot accept, and when we realize this and when we act to change it. For me, this process has stretched out over a long time, and I don't think I'm done yet. I'm still learning where the gaps are, where injustice hides, where bias pretends to be something else, and I'm still experimenting with ways to simply do better. On my own journey, I was raised by a deeply religious family. It was a big family of 12 children. I was the oldest, so I had a lot of responsibility. Throw in my innate curiosity about the cosmos and my questioning about the meaning of our existence, thoughts that fill the mind of a 13-year-old girl who read a lot of Camus and Thomas Merton. And that's about it. That was me at that age. My identity was Catholic and questioning. When I got accepted to Stanford, and Rati, I was the first girl from my school to be so accepted, another identity surfaced. I was a woman. I was to go to college to get married, to get a, quote, MRS degree, my mother said. That's for those of you who are younger, that means Mrs. Science, it was said, was too difficult a road for a woman. At least that's what was said to me. I turned to my books, this time books like James Joyce, T.S. Eliot, Vladimir Nabokov, to revel in the power of language. I majored in humanities. I did anthropology fieldwork among the Zapotecs of Oaxaca, and I did not get an MRS degree. And then completely by chance after college, I found my way to what my spirit really wanted, which was understanding our place in the universe. I found my connection to the cosmos through science. I worked hard towards a PhD in physics, and I got a new label, scientist. 10 years in, I found myself head of the Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics at Penn State University. It was my first job as an academic leader, and I didn't seek it, it found me. And my label became Woman Scientist Administrator. A few years later, I was asked by NASA to be its first woman chief scientist. I accepted because it was an opportunity to talk about the importance of women in leadership positions. Again, almost accidentally, a friend organizing a conference asked me to fill in at the last moment for First Lady Hillary Clinton, who had to cancel her speaking role. My remarks at that 1995 conference started like this. I'm an astronomer. I look at stars. Everywhere I look in astrophysics, I see women working behind the stars. I see a picture of Jupiter bruised by the infall of 24 pieces of a comet, and behind the image, I see the face of young MIT researcher Heidi Hammel. I see in evidence of planetary systems around distant suns the possibility of life outside our solar system. Behind this is the painstaking observational work at millimeter wavelengths by Anila Sargent of Caltech. I see in the birth of a mechanical rover that will take its first halting steps on Mars 2 years from now, the tenacity and vision of JPL's Donna Shirley. When I look at Saturn and admire its rings, I know that my graduate student school buddy, Carolyn Porco, is developing the first imager that will reach and orbit Saturn and image its rings. And when I look at the Northern Cross, I imagine that I see, once again after 20 years, the nova I discovered while looking up at night from the floor of the Grand Canyon. I wasn't the first to see and report Nova Cygni 1975, but for me, it was my discovery all the same. Everywhere I look in astrophysics, I see women working behind the stars. In Washington, DC, I see women engaged in setting science policy at the highest levels. I see remarkable job women are doing at the federal agencies, NIH, DOE, Education, DOD, NOAA, NSF, NIST, and NASA. I hear shining through those acronyms the strong, articulate voices of many, many women, and I named them at the time, who are changing the face of science in the course of science policy. I could make the same speech here today, only the names would be different. They would be the names of people on this panel. They would be the names of people in our audience. You are making history, even though you might not be aware of that now. I said in that speech that we needed to develop a vision of where we were going, a clear sense of mission and goals. We needed to frame the conduct of the new world of science that we envisioned. What are the policies we could aspire to and live by? And then develop a roadmap for the future, a roadmap with metrics and evaluation points, a roadmap that sees the world 10, 15 years from now as a different place for women in science. I urged everyone to do something similar in their own workspace. From NASA, I returned to academic administration, this time in the University of California system. When I was appointed chancellor of a UC campus in 2002, the headline in the LA Times said that I was the first Latina chancellor in the system. The word Latina was a new label for me. It was, in fact, kind of a new word at the time, meant to define a new demographic of the state. This turned my focus to a different direction, the need to lift up the opportunity for minority students in California. At UCR, I recognized that the vast region of what was called the Inland Empire was greatly underserved for medical and healthcare. Indeed, there was no public medical school for over 4 million people. I also came to know that the public medical schools of California and most other places in the nation lacked underrepresented students, a fact reflected in the diversity of doctors nationwide. So I asked myself, how could I change that? I began the slow march towards building a new medical school, one that would be proud of the diversity of its students, one that would make a transformation in the face of medical care. And today, that vision is realized in the UCR Medical School. I became president of Purdue University, especially noted for its excellent engineering school. Almost immediately, I became PI for an NSF program called Advance to promote the advancement of women faculty through the ranks. Our particular focus was on minority women in STEM. I came to appreciate the importance of institutional commitment to change and connecting with others across the country who are working towards similar goals. And then when I became NSF director, I saw the plethora of diversity programs that were funded by NSF. I saw that few achieved scale, with Advance being an exception. So I gathered 40 program officers from across the agency, and we started Includes, whose vision is, quote, to catalyze the STEM enterprise to work collaboratively for inclusive change, resulting in a STEM workforce that reflects the population of the nation. I believe it's made a transformative change in the way NSF thinks about and works towards diversity and inclusion in all its programs, and works through community action towards achieving scale. Today, I head the Science Philanthropy Alliance, a group of 35 prominent philanthropic foundations who give to science. The mission is to accelerate scientific discovery through visionary philanthropy. There is intense interest in the foundation of all these foundations that belong to it in DEI. In fact, we formed an interest group on DEI that meets monthly to share best practices among the foundations and hear from experts, including most recently the leaders of minority serving institutions. Laurel Espinosa, a program director at the Sloan Foundation with Tashira Gale of Higher Ed Insight, recently wrote an article whose title says it all. Quote, philanthropy has fallen short in its efforts to make STEM more diverse. We have the tools to fix it. This is a transformative effort for the Science Philanthropy Foundations, and I'm proud that the alliance I head is fostering this engagement. I hope what I've illustrated is that the culture of science is changing in many sectors that support science discovery, in government, in university, and philanthropy. My own journey is evidence that leadership is not always something a person seeks. Sometimes it comes to you. In my case, it presented itself as an opportunity to start a diverse medical school, an opportunity to increase the number of underrepresented women at a prestigious engineering university, an opportunity to pilot community action programs to increase STEM diversity at all educational stages, an opportunity to promote the values of inclusion and equity in the world of science philanthropy. The possibilities to make positive change are just everywhere. In my mind, you're a leader if you assume this responsibility. Sometimes these opportunities come knocking on your door, and sometimes you need to open your eyes wider to see the needs staring back. To conclude, I'd like to return to what I said at the beginning of my remarks. There's much focus today on defining ourselves, our identity. When I did a 23andMe profile, I saw that my DNA was all over the map, literally. There were only about 2 countries that I was missing. I could identify as white, as a lot of my ancestry is European, especially Irish and Spanish, as Native American, 14%, and as Asian, a few percent. There's no one label that captures who I am, and no one label that defines my life or contributions. And that's really my guidance to all of you seeking to be leaders. It's not your genes that will make you a leader. It's not your visible appearance. Those can be both assets and liabilities, but ultimately they don't define you. It's the questions you ask, the listening you do, the active engagement that you make with life. What needs to be changed? That's our question. Take a risk and act on it. Thank you.